Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
Today we are reading one of the Bible's most famous disputes with God, Abraham's insistence that God should have mercy on Sodom for the sake of its righteous, found in Genesis chapter 18, verses 16 to 33. Now, we love mercy as much as the next guy, but this time around we really wrestled with the profound entanglement of the righteous and the wicked in this story. There's no discussion here about simply stopping the wickedness in one way or another, or even eliminating the people who are perpetrating wickedness while leaving the righteous ones alone. They are all in it together. But if mercy in this case basically means ignoring the land's outcry and letting the wickedness stand, what does that mean for the innocent who continue to live there? In a modern society that so values individual autonomy, how do we think about the ways in which our fates are inextricably tied? Thanks for being with us. Hey, Bobby. Summer Bobby. How are ya?
Hey, I'm good. Actually, at this exact moment, I'm grading stuff, Bobby.
Oh.
But Summer Bobby is on the horizon, and I'm very excited to welcome him into the world.
You're the Bobby of the middle place.
The middle Bobby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I get that. But you seem to be middle Bobby wearing a shirt that seems to have, it's got two vibes for me. One is like kind of Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, it's Mr. Rogers' sweater and his little tie there.
But it's also like Headless Horseman. Because he doesn't have a head.
He does not have a head. It's just his sweater. But you're right. It is kind of like buttoned up, like in a weird way, like there should be a body in there.
There should be a head. Like maybe there was a head, but then he was...
Well, there's actually just no body either. Like it's Invisible Man, Mr. Rogers.
But yeah.
It also has like a little flower vibe going on, like kind of like 60s trippy, like a little bit mystery van, Scooby-Doo kind of feel going on.
That's true.
And then it says, "We are all neighbors," which, is a beautiful Mr. Rogers sentiment, which expresses
how grating Bobby feels.
I remind myself that everyone is my neighbor and I love them. Even though I have to grade their AI generated. No, my students mostly don't use AI, but I definitely read a couple yesterday.
Yeah,
that were
you know
AI.
it when you see it. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Bobby, we are on episode 3 of our disputing with God, which I still have in my mind this a little bit tantrumy, stomping your foot.
Yeah.
Saying, nope, that is not what we're doing, God, but thanks for your idea. We're reading Genesis chapter 18, quite a famous dispute between Abraham and God.
Yes.
We're going to read verses 16 through 33, which is the end of the chapter. This past year, we got to do a retreat together. Every once in a while, we get to lead retreats, and it's so much fun. And we did a retreat, and we focused on reading with the rabbis. So we were pulling sort of rabbinic interpretation, text, story related to things that happen in the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
And the discussion of this particular text was so interesting and rich, though we are not focusing in particular on Jewish interpretations of this text today. It really has kind of stayed alive for me, and I'm sure that
me too.
Some of that conversation is going to inform my thinking this morning.
I hope so. One of the things that I love about reading Hebrew scriptures with you is that you do have that, not just from this retreat, but just from your general life in the synagogue and in the Jewish world, you have that rich rabbinic tradition about a lot of these texts. One of the things you were talking about dispute as kind of foot stomping. And one of the things that I like about the way that this series has come together is not all of the disputes are of the same nature.
That's right.
And so this one to me does not read like a foot stomping dispute as much as a sort of a negotiation about, I don't know, something about God's judgment and God's mercy, which is related to some things that Moses and God were doing in the Exodus text, but in a different kind of register. It feels different to me. And so I'm looking forward to sort of parsing that out with you today as well.
Yes, I agree with all of that. I mean, I think I'm about ready to jump into the text. And before we do you want to remind folks sort of what has been happening, where we are in the story? We're halfway through chapter 18.
Yeah, I think it's worth just kind of resetting ourselves a little bit because, we were just historically speaking or narratively speaking about 400 years in the future.
Going back.
after the Exodus, and now we are jumping way back in time. And in the last couple of texts we were reading, Moses and God were reminding each other of the covenant with Abraham. And the story that we're reading today is part of that covenant with Abraham. And so, we're in Genesis chapter 18. Just a few chapters ago in Genesis 12, God had made the original promise to Abraham of land and progeny that we've been, when you're reading through Genesis, you're watching how that story unfolds. And finally, at the beginning of this chapter, God has come, and in this way that is not entirely clear to me, God appears and Abraham sees three people. And so in some way, God is God and two angels, or three angels that represent God, or
it makes it sound like Abraham has like three, like a double vision thing, like a triple vision.
He's got something going on. He needs to go see the ophthalmologist. Christians will want to read this as the Trinity has appeared to Abraham. And so I don't know exactly. I don't think we need to probably parse that, but they have shown up and they have said to Abraham and Sarah, this time next year, this promise that we have made is finally going to come to fruition. Sarah's going to have a child whose name is going to be Isaac. And this is the story where Sarah laughs and they have a good old time. Now, in this where we're picking up today is when that conversation, that little meal together, that promise has just ended. And God and the two angels, I think they are turning toward Sodom, where God has heard some stuff. So this follows up right on that promise that things are coming in the near future, that God is going to fulfill what God has said for Abraham. And now we're turning our attention toward what's going to happen in Sodom. Is there anything else you would want to say to get us ready for this text?
No. I think that's good to get us ready for this text. I mean, there are some earlier things I want to jump into as we're reading, but I think in terms of setting our context, you have set the context.
The context is set.
The context is set, and we're ready to go.
Let's do it.
All right. I am picking up in Genesis chapter 18, verse 16, and reading from the NJPS. The agents set out from there and looked down.
The agents. I love that. Do. The agents.
The agents.
I've got a little Men in Black thing going on. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, those guys. Okay.
You did not get very far in that text before I got.
It's good. It's summer, Bobby. It's good. We're having fun. Okay. The agents set out from there and looked down towards Sodom, Abraham walking with them to see them off. Now God had said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him? For I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of God by doing what is just and right, in order that God may bring about for Abraham what has been promised him." I'm going to stop us already there. And I want to ask about this, the sort of the context you just set for us. Do you feel like it matters that that's where, that Abraham has just sort of welcomed these three men, agents, angels, some way of encountering God in this way? And now God is about to go do something in Sodom, but pauses for a minute and says, wait a minute. Do I need to talk to Abraham about this?
I love that observation, Amy. Now, I had not exactly framed it for myself that way, connecting it to that meal, although now I think that I want to. I had been thinking about it as, God up until chapter 11 was kind of free reign God who could do whatever God wanted. And then God has, entered into this relationship with Abraham beginning back in chapter 12. And this seems to impinge in some ways on what it means for God to be God. That God now can't just exercise sovereignty in whatever way, but has to exercise sovereignty in covenanted relationship with a partner who is Abraham and ultimately his descendants. And, when you and I read this part of the Bible together, we are often talking about not only is Abraham learning how to be a human in relationship with God, but God seems to be learning how to be a God in relationship with humans.
Yeah.
And so I love reading this that way, and especially the way you're connecting it with, like, Abraham has just showed this incredible hospitality. Abraham does not know when he offers this hospitality at the beginning of this chapter that it's God. He might have suspicions, maybe, I don't know, but he just sees three men in need and welcomes them and offers them hospitality. And so Abraham has kind of put himself out there. And I love that way of reading it as God now reciprocating in a way, or at least like wondering, like, wait a second, if Abraham is going to tend to me in this way, what does that mean for me, for the way that I include Abraham in my thought process? I love that way of reading it.
There's a really interesting and I think moving, sort of doubling down on that idea, I guess, in the Hasidic literature, which is a corner of Jewish life, a little more mystical, that looks at verse 19. And in this part where it says, I've singled him out that he may instruct his children and his posterity. That verb instruct, yitzaveh, is very close to a verb that means sort of like to bind up, to bind together.
Oh,
and so there's this reading of it that Abraham is so bound up with his people and his posterity that to do something to the people is really to do something to him. Like, he is so invested in the future generations and sort of the people of the earth now, that, which is sort of the flip side maybe of what you were just saying. You were saying God recognizes that Abraham has responded with such generosity and attunement to God's visit to him, and to also be aware that Abraham has that kind of boundedness, that sense of like a tied fate with the other humans of the world, to be like, oh, this is going to affect Abraham.
I really love that, Amy, and you're helping me to make sense of what verse 18 is doing there, because, the people in Sodom are not Abraham's descendants. Lot and his family are Abraham's relatives. Lot is Abraham's nephew, but they're not his descendants. And so one way of thinking about it is like, well, what does Abraham really care what happens to them? Because they're not his family. But that promise in Genesis 12 was exactly, you will be blessed and all the nations will be blessed in you. And we get that repeated here. And so I love that way of thinking about this blessing that Abraham has received binds him not only to his own family, like his own descendants, but also binds him to all the nations of the world. So the way that covenant was stated, Abraham is a blessing for everyone. And so Abraham is exactly concerned for people who are not related to him biologically, like descended from him biologically. I love that.
It doesn't seem, though, that God has quite exactly anticipated that Abraham might want to have some kind of say about this plan. It seems sort of like I should just, what is that? Like the racy chart? Is that what it is? It's sort of like, who needs to be informed?
Yes.
Abraham needs to be informed. He needs, he doesn't necessarily need to give input.
I like that. This is the way, I don't know, I don't think my provost listens to my podcast, although she should. But this reminds me a little bit of...
If you're listening, please let us know.
Of my provost a little bit, who sometimes, I'm the chair of the humanities area, and sometimes my provost has made decisions that affect my area, and she's telling me about them.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what she thinks she is doing. And I say, wait a second,
Right.
have you thought about all these other things?
Right.
I like that way of reading it. God's just going to fill in Abraham about a decision that is already
Just
made.
Respectfully give you a heads up that this is happening.
You would not want to get surprised that this has happened.
But at the same time, some of the earlier stories in Genesis, especially as they are interpreted in Jewish literature, really bring out the fact that Abraham is not chosen just as sort of like a yes man. Like that Abraham is chosen for this covenant because he's attuned to what is beautiful and right in the world, and also what is troubled and broken in the world. Yes. And he'll say it.
I love that, Amy, because, I think of Jacob that way because of that very famous story of Jacob wrestling with God. And God
Jacob just asks for what he wants.
That's true. But you're right. God does like a good wrestle. Yes. And Abraham wrestles in a particularly positive way, moving way on behalf of not only his family, but also on behalf of others. And, the last 2 weeks we've been talking about Moses, who is a later figure narratively, who also wrestles. And so we've got this developing pattern, I think very clearly in the Hebrew scripture that God, I don't know if God likes it always, but this is the kind of partner God seems to want and God seems to gravitate to, is those who will wrestle back in these ways.
Yeah, I think that's right. Just to state sort of the obvious here, because it doesn't say exactly this in the text, it says, now God said, or God had said, or something like that. God is talking to God's self here, right? This is like an internal monologue.
Oh yeah, that's important to say. That's the way I read it. God is sort of talking to God's self. Yeah. I have discovered talk to myself when I'm walking up the stairs in my academic building.
Oh, good.
And I have a colleague whose office is right at the top of the stairs. And she's like, what are you talking to yourself about, Bobby? And I'm like, oh.
Oh, good morning.
Yeah. So maybe God, like I am an external processor with myself. Mm-hmm. Like I don't necessarily want to talk to anyone else, but I want to talk out loud to an imaginary person. And I think that's what God is doing here.
Mm-hmm. Wondering what God owes Abraham at this moment in their relationship.
That is so interesting that our narrator can give us insight into the mind of God. Like that kind of messes with your head a little bit.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that the way the question is posed is not what do I owe Abraham, or even should I tell him, but should I hide it? Like to not tell him seems like actively hiding it.
Yeah. That's really important. It's not should I consult him or should I engage him as a partner? It's not right to hold this thing back from him.
Yeah.
So yes, I think I don't quite know what to do with that just right now, but I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, especially as like Abraham is walking the guys, starting the agents on their way as they're going to Sodom. Like you can't just pretend like, it didn't occur to me to tell you, Abraham.
What it's reminding me of, Amy, is, when God says to Moses in our previous texts, go away from me so I can do what I want to do.
Totally.
This is like the opposite of that. Like I could go do what I want to do, but I just got to tell Abraham.
It doesn't feel quite right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although we don't know yet. We're about to see what'll happen next. But I don't know if God anticipates that he's going to argue or not.
It doesn't seem like it, does it?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, it's Bobby here from the Bible Worm Podcast. If you find yourself listening to this episode thinking, man, I really wish I knew all of this stuff last week, have we got a deal for you. Maybe you're a pastor who wants to work a week ahead on your sermon. Or maybe you're a Bible nerd who wants to show off your Bible knowledge at the water cooler before everyone else has a chance to listen to the episode. Whatever the case, if you'd like to get early access to our episodes, you can join our Patreon at the early worm level or higher. You'll get access to every episode a week before it's available to the general public. You'll also get a truly amazing Bible Worm sticker and the satisfaction of supporting a good cause. Oh, and you'll get ad-free episodes so you won't have to keep listening to messages like this one. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details. As always, thanks for listening to Bible Worm. And now, back to this week's episode.
All right, shall we go on?
Let's do.
Okay, I'm going to pick up in verse 20. Then God said, "The outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grave. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note." The agent went on from there to Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before God. Abraham came forward and said, "Will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it for you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that the innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?" And God answered, "If I find within the city of Sodom 50 innocent ones, I will forgive the whole place for their sake." Okay, so the last section, God is talking to God's self. No one else can hear God. We're just privy to this like internal thing.
Yeah.
How do you interpret this next part? God said, is God talking to Abraham or just within earshot of Abraham, or?
I have read that as God is addressing Abraham, although oftentimes, that would be clearer in the Hebrew. There would be a to Abraham there. But Abraham seems to respond in verse 22.
Abraham definitely hears it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I have just read that as an address because that's just like narratively what makes sense to me. Do you do something different with that?
When I first read it, I read it the same way as he is speaking to Abraham. Just now, when I was reading it aloud, there was something about maybe the fact that like the agent seems still to be there and the agents go on from there to Sodom, that it made me wonder whether God was sort of just saying this aloud so that Abraham could hear it, but not necessarily inviting a response. I don't know that it really matters so much one way or the other, but it's important to know if you're going to make a skit of this.
Yes, it is. It really is. And how you stage that makes some amount of difference.
Yeah.
So maybe we could read it as, are you reading it as God is telling the agents, or God is still talking to God's? I think you could read it either of those ways. Like, the agents leave now, and so maybe it's God has sort of given them their like, okay, here's the plan, guys.
Yeah.
And Abraham has heard it. I think I still want to read it as God has been thinking about this thing about whether God should include Abraham, and so God has included Abraham on purpose. I think that's where I'm going to how I'm going to stage my play.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there are other ways of staging it.
Yeah, no, let's go with that staging for now. And we'll see if we want to challenge it later. This might be a little bit of a side question, but I wonder in verse 21, well, first of all, just in terms of the staging, like it's a little complicated. Just like the story before this was complicated. It's these agents, these angels, these men who are going, but God says, "I will go down to see."
Yes.
So, okay, it's a little fuzzy how exactly all of that works.
Yes.
But verse 21 sounds pretty like, I don't know, anthropomorphic.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that? Like some people have said, like, "I will go down to see." What do you mean you'll go down? Like, where is God that God has to go somewhere else to see something?
Yeah, this is one of the places where I will often dispute with my students who say that, we know that God is omniscient and omnipotent and knows all things and can do all things. And I will say, I know that is the philosophical and theological conception we have of God. But narratively, that is not the way the Bible always seems to work. Here, I think we're in a J text. If you're thinking about J, E, D, and P, we're using the divine name before it has been revealed. And so that's the same author who writes the story of the Garden of Eden, where God is down in the dirt forming humans out of the clay and chatting with Adam and Eve in the garden. And so what I'm reading is God has heard rumors God has heard cries And so God is coming to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so God does not know. God is actually on a fact-finding mission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting that what God is saying is, have they really done all this? If not, I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not exactly that God is coming to see if they are doing it. It's that God wants to check and make sure
Is this
that
accusation
the reports
true?
are not,
Yeah.
the reports are not false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's how I kind of put that together. How do you read that?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I just have to say that the word for that, the outcry in verse 21, I just sat and said to myself in Hebrew for like 10 minutes last night because it's so fun to say. Hakatsa'akata.
Say that 10 times real
But
fast.
it is related to the word for the outcry in Exodus chapter 2, like the cry, the suffering cry of the Israelites that gets God's attention when they are enslaved, that it's like, this is a real cry. You got to do something. So there's some kind of huge outcry that God has heard. The famous Jewish interpreter Rashi takes this part and says, this should teach us that when a judge hears evidence, or like if you are in a place to judge, in a place of power where you're going to judge someone, you need to go and make sure it's true. Like you yourself go lay your eyes on the situation. If God does that,
yes,
you can do that too. So yeah,
I love that.
God's checking it out. And Abraham's about to really hold God's proverbial feet to the fire about justice here.
Yes.
So I think it's important to note here, like God is moving with justice in a particular way.
Amy, I love that so much. And now that you've drawn my attention to that word, I want to do a little Hebrew parsing exercise on hakatsa'akata. First, I want to just start with that's the word cry is tsa'aka.
Mm-hmm.
And so that hey that's on the end there is a third person feminine possessive, right? So her cry that has come out to me.
Mm-hmm.
The her there being Sodom's cry.
Oh, that's a great question. I guess so. I mean, that would make sense. Like cities are often feminine.
Yeah. This is I think is about to explode my interpretation of this text. So this is why I'm being so careful, is that it is the city herself that is crying out about the wickedness that is happening in her.
Just this past weekend, the Torah portion that we read in my community it was from the very end of the book of Leviticus, and it was about the land, and the land is a character in the story, and it was about how you have to give the land rest. But in the broader context, the idea that the land, the connection of God to the land is profound, and the land will. My rabbi described it as like the land is like the strict nanny in some way. The land will cry out if you're not doing what you need to do, and you will be in trouble.
I like that a lot because, that's absolutely the way that the land vomits people out in Leviticus. Amy, the reason that I'm sort of stuck on this third person pronoun, which I had not noticed until you pointed my attention to that word, is that I think I am stuck in a simplistic reading of this text, which has been troubling me in its simplicity, but now it's troubling me even more, which is to say that, in this text, as we'll see, you know how this text goes, Abraham's going to talk God down from punishing people who are wicked because there are people who are righteous. But the problem with that is the wicked people seem to be doing really wicked things, right? We get that language of cries of injustice are countless and their sin is very serious. Mm-hmm. And the city itself, it's not that other people from somewhere else are look how wicked they are. It's that the city herself is crying out. Mm-hmm. And so the reason this complicates it, I mean, you can see where I'm going, is that when Abraham starts to advocate to not punish the wicked, he is also advocating for God not to address the injustice that the city itself is calling out for.
Yes.
So that gets complicated, and it's not going to get any less complicated for me. I'm just warning you.
It's not going to get any less complicated, but I think, this issue in some ways came up in our last reading, and this was, one of the issues that at that lovely retreat we did, that we were talking about leading up to this, that it is just sort of baked into the nature of the world and to humanity, that there is terrible injustice and cruelty, and there is also great beauty and righteousness. And there doesn't seem to be any way to really take the beauty without the bad stuff. And so there are all these, still today, right? Like there are all these stories about what do we do about that? And this is in that category in my mind.
I'm thinking of sort of three possibilities that for how one could resolve a situation in which the righteous people are suffering at the hands of the wicked. And in the biblical text, in many of the texts, it is that the righteous get destroyed along with the wicked, which seems to be what maybe we're setting up for here, at least initially. Another option is that God would destroy all the wicked and just save the righteous, which is what happens in the Noah story of the flood. And then the third option is that the wicked would be saved on behalf of the righteous, and then maybe just kind of continue on being wicked and oppressing the righteous. Those are the options that seem to be on the table. And so maybe I'm saying that as much for me as anything else.
No, I'm really glad you said that, because one of the next questions that comes to me, okay, so God says this thing, and it says Abraham came forward, and it uses this verb, nagash, that is sometimes used in prayer. So sometimes that rabbis imagine that he's coming into sort of he's stepping forward to pray, to speak with God. And his question is not, well, I don't know, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? I had previously been reading that as somehow capturing the idea that you can't separate the innocent from the guilty. And so the presence of the innocent means you cannot sweep away the guilty.
Right.
But now as I'm saying it, I don't know that that's necessary from the way that Abraham says it. Maybe he's saying something else.
I mean, it is true that he is not saying, can you save the guilty? What he is saying is, don't punish the innocent along with the guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, what he seems to be saying is you can't just rain down brimstone on the whole place, which is what, is going to happen in the next chapter, because that is an imprecise punishment tool, I guess. But so I don't know exactly what the implications of what Abraham are saying are. But you're exactly right. What he's raising is, it is not fair just to punish the righteous while you're trying to punish the wicked.
Right.
And if there's an instrument that you can tease those out, like put the righteous on a boat when you flood the world, then okay.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. God is attuned to the outcry he has heard, and Abraham is attuned to who are my people in that place, who are not my descendants, but these people I feel connected to in that place that are innocent.
Yeah.
So then we get into the beginning of the bargaining, I would say. I have some more specific questions, but let me ask you first. How would you describe the way that Abraham goes about this? We talked about this with Moses also. How does Moses approach trying to change God's mind? How does Abraham go about it here?
I mean, there's two things that I notice here about what Abraham does. The first reminds me of something that we saw 2 times ago, I think it was, with Moses, talking about, God's reputation or God's nature, the way God wants to be in the world. So to say, it's not like you. You would not, a God would not do such a thing. Will the judge of all the earth not be just? And, some scholars have read this as distinguishing what it means to be a God from what it means to be a tyrant. That tyrants just go around destroying stuff that they're upset about. Gods have a higher justice principle that must be carried out. And Abraham is reminding maybe God here, you are a just God who cares about innocent people, not a tyrant who just destroys things. And so a little bit calling God back to God's true nature. which we talked a little bit about in the Exodus 34 text, which is
Yeah.
a complicated nature in the first place.
Yeah.
The other way I hear your question is about why does he start with 50?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a good question. I was trying to think about like how big would Sodom probably have been?
Oh, that's a great question.
And I guess I don't really probably know the answer. I'm imagining it's probably like a couple thousand people or something like that. So 50 is small. Like, and we're talking like 5% of the population maybe, or something like that. So it's, but it's not like...
It's small in proportion, but it's not small. Like a group of 50 people.
Yeah.
That's a big group of people.
Walter Brueggemann in his commentary says we should not think overly much about the specific numbers in this text.
Yeah.
So I hear him sort of on my shoulder being like, what are you doing? I think that Abraham has started with the smallest number he thinks he could start with and not get laughed out of the room, Like, well, what if there's 50? And then he's going to push down from there.
Yeah, Abraham's language sounds pretty strong to me, like Chalila lacha. Like it is like a Chilul Hashem is like it's a disgrace to, like, that's something you say, like that Jews say to other Jews in the world when it's like, do not behave that way in the world because you bring disgrace to God by whatever obnoxious thing you're doing.
Yeah, you will disgrace yourself.
You're bringing disgrace to your own self by, far be it from you. You cannot do that. And I find it really kind of, I don't know, particularly moving here because Moses had this whole story to appeal to say like, well, you brought them out of Egypt and people are going to say things. And like, I feel like Moses had a little more to go with. Abraham doesn't have a whole lot of examples of how God really is in the world yet, but he just asserts like, you are not going to be that guy.
Yeah.
You're not going to be that guy.
And he says it twice in that one verse, Halila lacha.
Yeah.
Like, it's just it's almost like it just comes out of him in a sense. Like, how could, you're going to disgrace yourself.
Yeah. Another way that Jewish interpreters go with this section is focused on verse 24. He says sort of twice within that verse, if there should be 50, my translation says innocent. Does your translation say innocent?
It says innocent, but it also has a footnote that says innocent means righteous.
Yeah, tzaddikim is, okay.
I think that one of the things that we struggle with, I don't know if Jews struggle with this, Christians struggle with the word righteous because it sounds very pious.
Yeah.
Like we are religiously observant in a proper way. And I don't think that's what it means here. I think it's like ethically upright.
Right. These are
maybe because they're religiously observant, but the issue is their ethics, not their religious orientation.
So what the interpreters pull out is that twice it says innocent within the city, or like 50 innocent who are in it. Like it puts the innocence in the context of the city of Sodom. And sort of what they draw out from that is that even if these people are not like the most righteous, like the best people you've ever met, in the context of what's happening in the city, they are doing great. Like they are trying.
I love that.
They are not doing the really bad stuff.
That's so interesting. So there's not like an absolute bar of
that
righteousness.
There's not
it's
an
like
absolute
you're
bar
graded
of
on a
righteousness.
curve.
You're graded on a curve. That's right. Yes, it's like Abraham's theory of relativity. That like depending on your if they were in another context where their community really supported a life of, this really upright what I don't know, supported a high level of piety or ethics or whatever, then they would be doing even better. But in their context, you got to take the whole picture into account here. They're doing well.
I love that so much, Amy. When I was in seminary, I took a year and went out to LA and I worked in South Hollywood with boys who were at risk for gang involvement. And, if you took them someplace, like I took them to camp at like a froofy white people Protestant camp, and they were like the bad kids, but they were like amazing kids I'm like, these are the kids who are not in the gangs, right? They are
Yes.
amazing. They're doing
Yes.
such good work because the pressure on them is so high that
Yes.
just the fact that they're not succumbing to that pressure is amazing.
Yeah.
And so I love that way of thinking, like they're doing good given their context.
Yeah.
And if you put them in, compare them to somebody else, then maybe I
But
don't
it
know what
doesn't
the
matter.
bar
You
is.
can't, there's no absolute bar
Yeah,
here.
I
And that
love that.
messes with the word sadiq, righteous, in an interesting way
Yeah.
also. Like, what does it look like in this context to be upholding the high end of things?
Yeah, I love that.
Is it surprising to you, Bobby, that there never seems to be a conversation about just letting the innocent go?
Yeah.
Like Abraham doesn't ask for it. God doesn't bring it up. Abraham just says, will you wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the 50?
Yeah. I think this is what I'm struggling with a little bit, Amy,
Yeah.
as I was saying earlier,
Yes,
is
yes.
that there's a sense of entanglement
Yes.
here
It's a good
between
word.
the righteous and the wicked. And you would love it, I think, if you could disentangle. It would at least be clearer if you could disentangle the innocent from the guilty, the righteous from the wicked, and then punish those who are being wicked. But there seems like you're exactly right. That does not seem to be an option on the table right here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is probably true in my experience of the world, that, we are all tangled up together. And then I myself am
Yes.
a complicated
Yes.
entanglement of righteous and wicked. And so maybe this text is sort of acknowledging that that's just the reality of the human world in which we live. And you might wish you could do something different than that, but actually you can't. And so you've got to decide, are you going to destroy the wicked and also the righteous along with them? Or are you going to preserve the righteous and the wicked get to continue on?
I love that, Bobby. And as you were talking, it made me think of it sort of as like a microcosm of an issue that really comes up since creation, in rabbinic texts at least, that God is aware that by creating humans, you are bringing all the good into the world and you are bringing all the bad into the world. And
Yes.
there's not a way to only do the good. And
Yes.
so like it feels like very directly playing out in this situation.
Yes.
You cannot preserve the good and wipe out the wicked. It's so counter the like American story of individualism. And so
Yes.
it's, I think, important, uncomfortable to try on, and also important to try on.
I think that's exactly right.
All right. Shall I read the rest of our chapter?
Let's do.
Pick up in verse 27. Abraham spoke up, saying, "Here I venture to speak to my sovereign, I who am but dust and ashes. What if the 50 innocent should lack 5? Will you destroy the whole city for want of 5? I will not destroy if I find 45 there," came the reply. But he spoke up again and said, "What if 40 should be found there? I will not do it for the sake of the 40, came the reply. And he said, "Let not my sovereign be angry if I go on. What if 30 should be found there? I will not do it if I find 30 there," came the reply. And he said, "I venture again to speak to my sovereign. What if 20 should be found there? I will not destroy for the sake of the 20, came the reply. And he said, "Let not my sovereign be angry if I speak but this last time. What if 10 should be found there? I will not destroy for the sake of the 10, came the reply. Having finished speaking to Abraham, God departed, and Abraham returned to his place. So Abraham has just gone from like a pretty animated tone with God,
Yes.
you know, this Chalila Lacha, like not like you are not this guy, really arguing,
Yeah.
to I am but dust and ashes.
Mm.
I don't know, how would you describe Abraham's approach, I guess, in this, once he's gotten that first argument out of the way?
I think the way that I'm responding to, maybe I'm responding to the way you're reading the text or asking the questions, which I really like, is the way that I'm reading it right now is that Abraham realizes that he kind of overstepped a little bit with it. Halilacha, like he spoke what was true to him.
Yes.
And he said to God what needed to be said to God.
Yeah.
And then he's like, like you are God and I am not. And so now he's sort of, but we're in it now.
Yeah.
And so I sort of feel him that way, as saying like, I have stood toe to toe with you as though I am allowed to speak to you that way. And he did it. And God was fine with, like, God didn't object. And then now he's saying, okay, I realize that I'm just a human. And so I'm going to talk to you in a more respectful manner. But he's still pushing, he's still after the same thing. He's just doing it in a way that's recognizing that God has a power that he doesn't, but still engage with God as a partner.
Yeah.
How do you read Abraham here?
I think all of that is just right. And I think it's really interesting that he sort of gets God to agree to this initial position that he kind of forcefully puts out.
Yeah.
And then from here on out, he only really asks questions to sort of like almost lead God through this like processing,
yes,
thing. But he doesn't really make another case.
That's right.
He just somehow gets God to orient toward, now we're counting the good. And like, how many innocent, how many righteous can we count?
Yes.
There's again a midrash that Abraham says, like, well, count me among the righteous. And you know what? God, you are the most righteous one. Count yourself among the righteous. Like, how else can we... there are some Jewish communities that if you're trying to make a minyan for prayer, you need 10 people. That if you have 9, they'll count a Torah scroll.
Oh, I love that.
we got it. Yeah. Like, we really want to get to this number.
Amy, along those lines, one of the things that I notice about the way that Abraham moves from 50 to 45 is he doesn't put the number 45 out there, right? Like, what if there are 45 righteous? He says, what if we're lacking 5 righteous? It's just a little number.
Yes.
Like, would you really destroy them just because there's 5 that didn't show up?
Yeah.
And so, like, that 5 feels very different to me than the, like, 45.
I didn't even notice that. I love that observation.
By the way, do you know the song Minion Man?
Like, I feel like I don't know, I know that phrase, I think. Will you sing it for me?
I studied it. I don't know. I don't remember how it goes. I studied at Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies a long, long time ago now. And there were some Jewish students from Australia, and they sang this song called Minion Man. And it was about, they would say it Mobile, Alabama. And they meant Mobile, but in Australia, it seems like Mobile. And the song was about how there was only 9 Jews in Mobile, Alabama. And whenever the 10th Jew showed up on a trip through town, they were like, won't you stay for dinner, Minion Man? It's because they had a minion. And so
that's actually really...
So that's what
that's really like, that's song. Really touching, like thinking about those situations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard when you have 9. I mean, you can't say a lot of prayers when you only have 9.
Yeah.
I'm going to look it up. I love that. It's one of the most exciting things to my bar mitzvah students when, like, after their bar mitzvah, I'll be like, they need a minion. Like, just go sit in the room. And they're so excited to be the minion maker.
Just because we're throwing around this word, and that we should just probably say that the minyan or minion is the number of Jews, or in the Orthodox tradition, Jews. Male Jews, adults needed to have the community prayer. Is that right?
There's certain prayers you can only say with a minyan, and you can only read Torah with a minyan. And one of the prayers you can only say with a minyan is the mourner's prayer. And so in particular, if you have people in the community who are mourning, like, you will beat the pavement for a minyan. Like, I know synagogues that will go out on the street and like wave people down. And like if Jews drive by, they're like, they need a minyan. Just stop go in so they can say Kaddish. Yeah.
And the number is 10.
It's 10.
And does the number come from this text?
Probably.
Or is that complicated?
I don't know. But it seems like it would. I don't know the answer to that. It seems like it would. Okay. I mean, I think I wrote down this question, but I think you've already answered it. In a way, this seems so formulaic. Like, why do we have to go through this whole thing? It just says the same thing over and over again. Yeah. But also it doesn't. Like, it's not that they don't, like, Abraham doesn't use the same words and God doesn't use the same words every time. So like I had written down the question, why do they have to go through this? Why can't they just skip to 10? But I think we've kind of said why they can't skip to 10.
Well, I think part of it is it's good storytelling, right? Like you get kind of drawn in this way. But I do think part of it too is this what we were just talking about the incremental moves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to make the big jump, you would think, I don't know. But if you just go 5 at a time or 10 at a time, then it seems like, oh yeah, I wouldn't destroy it just because there's 10 fewer people or 5 fewer people.
Right.
So to me, that's the logic of the argument.
The positive spin on what we would call a slippery slope. Like once you've already agreed to 50, are you really not going to agree to 45? And then you're really not going to agree to 40. Like,
exactly.
I mean,
really, just those 5?
Yeah, right. Why do you think he stops at 10? Oh, I know. Brueggemann said we shouldn't worry about the numbers.
No, but I love that question so much. Even though I don't have a great answer to it. Because, Abraham predetermines, let me speak just once more.
That's right.
And so he has decided he's not going to ask again. It's not that God says, okay, 10 is enough.
Which is how I used to read it, because it says, having finished speaking to Abraham, God departed. So it sounds like God was like, we done here.
Yes. But Abraham is the one who determined that this next thing that I'm going to say, this next offer I'm going to make is my last offer. And I don't know why he stops. My recollection from that retreat you were talking about that we did is that there was a midrash that Abraham already knew because of Noah and his sons.
Yeah, it was
and
like they
wives.
calculated the number of humans that would have been on the ark, and it would have been 10 between Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives. And so since that hadn't been enough.
Right. Or maybe that number is 8. I don't know. I don't know how
it
many
was
wives they had.
like
the number's
that.
like 8 or something. Yes. And so he knew he couldn't go lower because we already had that situation. I'm not sure if that's in Abraham's mind here or not. I think that's a really creative answer to that question. I have tended to read Abraham as just losing his nerve. That you can't expect less than 10. You would save the city for less than 10. And so Abraham's just like, I've said it, I've gone as far as I think I can go. Yeah. Even though in my reading, God has given him no indication that he shouldn't ask for more.
Yeah.
God has never said, I'm angry. Abraham keeps saying, don't be angry with me. But God has never given any indication of being angry.
That's right.
So I don't know. I think Abraham loses his nerve right there. What do you think about that?
I really appreciate that you pointed out that the text gives us no indication that God is that God is getting angry or even annoyed. I mean, I will admit that I get annoyed reading this, because I just feel like it gets boring to me.
That's funny that I just said it's told this way for the sake of good storytelling.
And
you're like, oh my God, just get on with it.
Skip over it. But maybe that's precisely because it doesn't tell us anything about what God is thinking about it. So I think it makes sense to say, maybe losing their nerve. We've talked, maybe it was during the regular season about the importance of having a community of people who are going to help you in some way to live the kind of life that you want. And at some point, if you're really on your own somewhere, it's just not impossible, never give up hope, but it's awfully hard.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if we could think about it as is there some kind of essential core group that can give each other strength in this? And if not, then maybe it is a sort of lost cause. I don't know.
Yeah. The other way to think about it that you're making me sort of ponder is not that he lost his nerve, but that he's reached the limits of his own sense of okay, if there's less than 10, then they just deserve. Right. You've got a more positive. Your more positive spin is there's not enough of a community there to support people. My more negative spin is if there's not even 10 people there, then that's a lost cause.
We got to move on.
And so it's a human limit. It's Abraham's limit of where the lost causeness is that he reaches before we know if he's reached God's limit. You would kind of like Abraham to keep pushing until God says, no, I'm going to destroy it. Or it doesn't say that, But Abraham reaches his own limits first.
But
maybe.
it's nice in a way not to have, otherwise it feels like this whole text is set up as God is justice and Abraham is mercy. And that's how this argument is going. And Abraham is just pulling God over more and more towards a kind of, I won't say away from justice, but like with more and more sort of mercy mixed in. But Abraham also does have a recognition that maybe there is a point that that the justice side has to carry the day.
It is so interesting that the phrase that's bouncing around in my head is the cost of mercy. I don't know if I titled something that recently. Anyway. But I don't know, like it's so hard to me to say, like, if there were 10 people, righteous people there, they don't deserve to get destroyed with the wicked. But if there's only 9, then those 9 do. Like, that's really hard for me. Yeah. But also to say all of these people who are doing wickedly get to continue to do wickedly. Like, that's also hard for me. And maybe it's the 9 righteous people who are actually crying out against all the wicked people. And so, like, it's just such a complicated situation where you're not destroying the city because you don't want to destroy the righteous people who are crying out against the wicked people wanting to be saved from them. I've talked myself into a very complicated theological place that I cannot extricate myself from.
I'm actually glad that we've made this text nice and complicated for you, because it's one of these texts that we read so many times that, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just like, mercy's good.
Mercy's good. Yes, I feel like that it is easy to read this text just as mercy's good.
And I think maybe
I like mercy.
I think maybe that is ultimately what I think, but thinking that has implications that are hard.
Bobby, I love this image at the end of the chapter. You know, we started when Abraham gets into this conversation with God, it says that he draws near, like he steps forward. And then at the end, it says God departs and Abraham returned to his place. Shavlim komo. And I don't know, I want to read that as more than just a plot point that they both have sort of like not returned to their corners. I mean, it's not like they're boxing, but like they had this encounter really sort of up close together and were like in it really deeply. And then God went back to God's stuff and Abraham went back to Abraham's stuff. And I don't know. I think for me, it just sort of, it draws out the unusual, I don't know, special, almost miraculous, like fact that they were on this sort of stage together for so long in this conversation.
Yes.
And then they went back to their usual realms.
I like that a lot, Amy. So what you're making me think about is that when we start to dispute with God, one danger that we run into is to begin to think that we know better than God, or that we are God,
that we're ruling together with God all the time.
Yes.
That we're
And so to have that, God went to God's place to do God things, and Abraham returned to Abraham's place.
Yeah,
really does emphasize that, like, we are in this thing together, but at the end of the day, God is God and human is human.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Amy, this story reads one kind of a way to me if you end it right here. The fact that Genesis 19 comes next, which is exactly a story of the destruction of Sodom and only Lot and his family escape. Like, I can't help but think about that story while I'm reading this one. I mean, I think we're probably not supposed to separate them in our biblical imaginations. I don't know. I mean, maybe the one response is just that there weren't 10 righteous people in Sodom. And so, God actually ends up
having to
being more generous by, and also gives a chance to escape. Yeah. So extricates the righteous from the wicked city.
Yeah.
I just we seem to have gotten set up here for this kind of gracious, merciful finish. And then that is not the way that ends up going.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important, a really important observation. And it's sobering. Like They have had this whole conversation lifting up as high as they can the value of mercy. And yet it is not that there's no just, like they have not taken the justice off the table, and they can't meet the bar that they set. And they observe the bar. Like it's not that they don't have the proverbial guts to do the hard thing. It's that they really are trying to go as far as they can with mercy, and they didn't get there. All right, Bobby, you've read this story a whole bunch of times in your life. How is it reading to you on this very day, on this summer morning?
I have read this text a lot of times in my life, and it always reads a little differently to me. And we have troubled this text in a way that I like to have it troubled, and also that I don't quite know how to put it back together again. One of the things that I really love about this text is Walter Brueggemann points this out in his commentary, that we so easily talk about guilt by association, but we don't talk about innocence by association. And this text is about, can we not can we tie the innocent up with the wicked around them who are doing wickedness, but can we let the innocence of the few righteous people determine the fate of the wicked ones around them? So what this text is asking is really, what Abraham is asking for is something that's really kind of radical, which is to say, let's treat this place based on the righteousness of its most righteous people, not on the wickedness of its most wicked people. And even a very small contingent of righteous people should determine the fate of the whole, God's judgment of the whole. And like previous to today, I have loved that idea. I think I still kind of love that idea, that we would be merciful to the wicked based on the righteousness of the righteous. But it is clearer to me today the cost of that, which is that the cry of maybe the very righteous ones that we're preserving the city for have to go unheeded if you can't disentangle people, because the wicked continue to go on being wicked. But this text seems to be suggesting that God is interested in that idea. God, it's not where God starts, but God does respond. And as we were saying, God responds without any indication that this is making him frustrated or angry, or this is a bad thing that God doesn't want to do. That God is kind of willing to go in this direction. I kind of wonder for myself, like what it would be like to sort of inhabit being Abraham, and instead of praying for God to harm our enemies, like if we pray for God to protect our enemies because the innocent people who live among them, or if instead of treating a group that's not us, like, how the tendency that at least many of us have is to treat a group by the worst member of that group we can think of. If we could start to think of groups that are not us according to the best member of that group we could think of, what a transformation that might be. As a Christian, one of the things that I've been thinking about this text is, what Abraham wants God to do is save the city of Sodom for the sake of 10 righteous people. And he loses his nerve or whatever he does there at the number 10. In the Christian story, one way of reading what happens in the Jesus story is that God actually brings this story to its ultimate conclusion, which is not that God saves one city for the sake of 10 people, but that God saves the whole world for the sake of one righteous person, who is Jesus. It's a different way of thinking about atonement and like what was Jesus doing here, but it's one that I think is worth Christians considering, that what God has decided to do, in the same way that Abraham is asking God to treat Sodom based on its righteous people, God has just made a choice to treat the world based on the righteousness of Jesus. And so there's a broad scope of mercy that comes out of that. It also runs in, when you think about a broad scope of mercy, you run into all these problems that I've been raising about, but what about, like, I don't really want the wicked to be punished so much as I want them to stop being
cease
wicked.
being wicked. Right. We want wickedness to leave the earth.
Yeah. So it raises a real question about like, how broad is God's mercy and how uncomfortable, like, where is our number that we get uncomfortable in the way that Abraham got uncomfortable? And how should we think about that? So that's kind of what this text is opening up for me today in a way that doesn't quite tie up in a neat little bow, but it has raised a lot of good questions for me about my own, both personal and theological way of being in the world.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy? What are you seeing in this text?
Bobby, I love what you said, and I love in particular this idea that what if we could see groups that are not ours, where we're inclined to see some usually famously bad person who is part of that group as the representative of the group, which happens all the time to like every minority group everywhere. Probably not even just minority groups, that people will see one person and take them as an indication of the group's fundamental wickedness. And what if we could bend the other way? I'm trying to think about this text in terms of the theme that we have set for ourselves this summer, which is disputing with God.
Yes.
And one thing that I'm really appreciating, I think, is that Abraham seems to accept from the beginning this idea that seems really pervasive here, that the wickedness and the goodness within humanity and within Sodom and maybe within each one of us also is entangled. Like that Abraham never asks to separate the good people from the wicked people. There's just even though you're right in chapter 19, that is a little bit what happens. There's just an assumption that we are a collective. We're responsible for one another and our fates are intertwined. And to have to argue it from that perspective, which is not at all the obvious perspective from me, because I grew up in America and I want everyone to have their own individual story. And I am increasingly aware as I get older of ways in which this more collective approach is true. Like the things that we do to ourselves as a people, or that we do to our planet, that we do to our justice system, that we do to the dehumanization that happens in our societies, it affects all of us. You can't opt out of it no matter how much money you have or no matter how much status you have. And so then the question really becomes, if we can't get to that kind of individualized justice, what are we even arguing? What is there that we can possibly argue for? And so I think Abraham's approach of trying to set the bar at a place where God will meet him, and then just keep stretching from there. Like if we can agree on 50, and then as you were pointing out, what if we just lack 5? Can we stretch our mercy a little bit? Can we stretch our positive read of the situation from that place? What is possible in our own time?
I really like what you're saying there, Amy. What you're making me think of is that passage from Jeremiah 29, which is seek the welfare of the city where you have been sent. And I don't quite know why that is, but your sense that we're all entangled up together. And so in order for the righteous to thrive, the way to do that is for everybody to be treated with mercy. Like that's the only way. If you can't disentangle us, then you have to create a world in which everyone is treated with mercy. And that may not address our sense that we'd like wicked people to be punished. And, there has to be some kind of way of spreading the mercy so that it gets enacted in human systems and not just in theological outcomes.
Yeah.
but I think there's something to that to start with. In order for the righteous people to thrive, we have to
then everybody has
let
to
them live.
Yeah.
And everybody has to thrive. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard. That's a hard conclusion for me, but I think that's what this text is asking me to sit with. So I'm going to sit with it.
I love it when a text leads me to a conclusion I don't like.
I know.
Not that I don't like it. That is hard for me.
To be true.
Yeah. That makes me think that maybe the text has actually gotten to say something.
Well, next week, we are moving on to a sort of different, there's a different tone in our argument next week. We are reading from the book of Jonah, one of my very favorite characters who's just like, nopity nope. No,
Yep.
We're not doing that.
Yeah.
We're reading chapters 3 and 4, short, Jonah short.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing what we can discern about our world through Jonah's eyes.
I mean, in some ways, Jonah is raising exactly the problem that you and I have just been raising that comes out of this text and is trying to address it in his own way. So I think that will be a interesting conversation.
Yeah. I look forward to it. Thanks for this
Me too,
conversation,
Amy.
Bobby. This was fun.
You too. See you next time.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us to keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all our Patreon supporters for helping us make this podcast possible.
Join us again next time as we move on to yet another very famous argument, this time in the book of Jonah, chapters 3 and 4. Until then, keep on digging.